Hey guys, before this video gets started, I want to give everyone a reminder and an announcement that if you haven't heard yet, this Saturday, June 6th, I am hosting a Last Stand community event for the Division 1 in celebration of hitting 3,000 subscribers on the channel. I thought this would be a really great way to give back to you guys and a great opportunity for us PvPers to relive the glory of Last Stand, because personally, I haven't been able to get a game of it going ever since Div 2 launched, so it's been quite a while. So, June 6th, which is this coming Saturday, queue up for Last Stand at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the hour, and we'll get the fun started. I myself am on Xbox, and so that's where you'll be able to get into a game with me. However, I highly encourage PS4 and PC players to get in on this too. Maybe we can make a real resurgence of the mode for a day. I'll be making a highlight video of the games I plan, so if you want the chance to be featured in one of my videos, then be sure to join in the event. We'll start at 3 Eastern Time and keep playing for as long as there's still enough people to start the matches. There will be a link in the description to my community post which has the full details of the event, so save the date, spread the word, and I hope to see you all there this Saturday. Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we have another video covering the developing changes for the upcoming title update 10 for the Division 2. This should be one of the last ones because PTS Phase 3 is, as far as I know, slated to be the final PTS phase before the devs step back and begin the process for verification so TU10 can be released later this month. We're fast approaching this update being in our hands, and I'm very excited for it. I hope you guys have been enjoying my coverage on this update. I know for some of you, you read this stuff as soon as it's released, but I'm sure many of you are unaware of these weekly updates and constant tweaks and changes made by the devs on the PTS, so I hope this is some value to a lot of you. This update is pretty critical for the Division 2 at this point in time, given how awesome it looks to be for both PvE and PvP, and I think it's important that everyone stays informed. And yes, as with how Phase 1 and 2 both brought some pretty epic changes to the game that many have been asking for and anticipating for a long time, Phase 3 doesn't disappoint and continues to show the devs are really listening and making big changes in the right direction. Many have pointed out by now that for these Phase 3 patch notes, the devs really took their time leaving long and detailed developer notes below specific changes so that we, the community, can get some insight into their thought processes. This is a really positive development in their process that I hope continues into the future, and so as with every other patch note coverage thus far, we'll leave a link to the full notes in the description for you to go check out yourself if you wish to do so. But without any further ado, let's get into the details. Okay, so similar to the other recaps I've done, I'm not going to go over like everything, like all the bug fixes and all that, but like I said, those notes will be linked in the description if you want to see everything, but we're just going to go over the main highlights here. So general, increased rifle base ammo capacity by 50%. It's a good change, should be helpful. Gunner specialization enhancement talent from the weapon handling bonus is reduced from 15 to 10%, and that makes sense because weapon handling is getting a quadruple buff, so that makes sense that they're bringing that down a little bit, but it should still be a pretty nice talent to have for Gunner, especially if you're doing like legendaries and you're staying in cover and stuff. That'll be a nice one to have. The NPC difficulty and balance changes. They're reverting the huge stat effect nerf that they applied from Phase 2. It's being reverted for pretty much everything, and so that's pretty huge. They noted that some legendary bosses and specific archetypes in Phase 3 currently are not reverted, but by the time that TU10 comes out, they will all fully be reverted to their previous levels. And the developer note reads that one of the obvious advantages to running a PTS in multiple phases is that we can be afforded the opportunity to try experimental ideas while receiving immediate feedback. We knew this could be a controversial change, but we wanted to try it anyways to see how it would affect the endgame meta. Unfortunately, one of the things we failed to do was appreciate just how much a blanket resistance buff to NPCs would affect a viability of non-crowd control status effect builds. We never intended to release TU10 with any sort of nerf as significant as that, and fully intended to land somewhere much lower than the resistance value seen in PTS Phase 2. Despite those intentions, we agreed that these resistance changes were not in the best interest of the game, so they've been entirely reverted in favor of addressing the particular crowd control skills we feel are currently scaling too high in both uptime and frequency. More information on those changes can be found below in the skills portion of the patch notes. So yeah, instead of just applying a blanket buff to the NPC resistances, they're going to tune down some of those specific skills like the Firefly and some of those, but like the note said, we'll get to that in just a little bit. So for loot containers are part of the living world activities, now scale with global difficulty. This is very good. This is something that's been pretty annoying ever since Warlords came out. Like in missions and control points, you were getting purple gear out of these crates because they were scaling to normal difficulty. That will no longer be the case. The developer note says several issues regarding loot not scaling properly properly in PTS Phase 2 have been addressed. These are specified in the bug fixes section. So some of those were supposed to be there last week in Phase 2, but they weren't yet. Now they will be there, and for TU10 launching, those will all be sorted out. We have some further exotic changes, including another buff to the Bighorn, which I'm very excited about, but here's the note that they had on them first. TU10's significant buff to weapon handling meant some exotic weapon mods no longer made sense or resulted in overtuned performance that no longer fit with the original design profile. We also took this opportunity to make improvements to underperforming exotic mods and configurations. So most of these are just huge changes to all the mods on the exotics. I'm not going to necessarily go through every single one, but we'll point out the highlights. So the Bighorn, the big game hunter headshots now deal 2% headshot damage up from 1, so now that stacking functionality goes up to 100%. That's really nice. Increased optimal range from 27 to 40 meters. That should be good considering it's also a rifle on top of an AR. Optics mod increased from 0 to 30% headshot damage. That's really nice because currently the sight on the Bighorn gives you no bonus. It just says that it can allow you to switch firing modes from full auto to single, and so this is going to be a really nice bonus to stack with that headshot damage stacking functionality. Magazine bonus mod changed from 7% headshot damage to 10% reload speed, and this is really good considering the Bighorn has a low mag of 30. It should help with, if you can get really quick reloads, then that, mag size isn't as much of an issue if you're using the gun as an AR. So having it maxed out on your watch and rolling like 2 things of weapon handling, you're gonna have a really nice reload time and overall better handling with the stability and accuracy and all of that. So the Mantis, they just buffed and switched around some of its things for headshot and crit. The Nemesis got a buff to its headshot damage and a reduction in its weapon handling. The Chameleon got a bit of a nerf considering it's so good right now in the PTS. They didn't nerf its damage or anything, but they did change a bit with how the talent works. So now it takes 75 shots to the body to proc the increased weapon damage bonus, but now that bonus is 90% instead of 80. So it's actually a buff, but also a nerf at the same time because it's harder to proc. So this should just balance it out a little bit. I think since the weapon damage is so high, this shouldn't be too much of an issue to get this going, and you'll get an even bigger bonus when you do proc it. So it should be nice. And the mods, I just kind of swapped around to still give accuracy and crit chance, but now instead of crit chance on the underbarrel, you get stability, so that's a change there. The Merciless/Ruthless has had a pretty big nerf considering it was so powerful in Phase 2. Now the binary trigger reduces the amplified weapon damage at 7 stacks from 900 to 500%, and the explosion damage from 1200% to 500%. From what I've heard, this makes it just slightly better than it is right now on live, but still not very great, and so I think they will probably land somewhere around the 700% range for both of these values, is what I would imagine would happen between now and TU10, but we'll just have to wait and see. The muzzle mod has gone down from 20 to 10% stability, the underbarrel has gone from 20 to 10% weapon handling, and the magazine mod has gone from 10 to 15% reload speed. And they added a note for the Merciless. Specifically, the Merciless was previously balanced for its very unwildly handling and compensated with very high burst damage. With access to much higher weapon handling, this is being toned down dramatically. The Eagle Bear just has one change, that's underbarrel mod is being changed from 10% stability to 10% weapon handling. That should be pretty nice because now it's obviously giving 10% stability, accuracy, reload, and swap speed, so this should make it a bit better. The Lady Death is getting some pretty interesting changes, I must say. The stacks are being lowered from 40 to 32, with the amplification per stack from 60 to 75%. This just makes a lot of sense because basically, if you didn't know, the mag of the Lady Death is 32, and so its talent was going up to 40, which didn't really make sense because you couldn't hit 40 shots in one mag unless you're running True Patriot. So now this will make sense so you can get the full stacks in one magazine. And beyond that, it's getting 5% more crit chance on the optics, and the muzzle is getting switched from crit chance to crit damage, and the underbarrel is going from 5% crit damage to 500% melee damage, which is really interesting. I think that's a really cool change and should allow for some really cool builds, considering the Lady Death is all about movement and getting up close to people, considering its talent and it's an SMG. This should be a really nice addition, and I'm pretty excited to try it out, I must say. The Pestilence got a bit of a nerf with its handling. It's going from 10% stability to accuracy on its muzzle mod, and the underbarrel is going from 10% weapon handling to 10% stability, so that'll balance it out a little bit. The Chatterbox is just getting a ton of swaps to all of its different mods and where the crit is coming from. The one to note is that the magazine mod is changing from reload speed to plus 10 rounds, but then the base magazine capacity is going from 60 to 50, so that's kind of just a nerf because you can, if the devs are controlling what the base stats of the gun are plus what the mods are, then whatever they decide is basically just how the gun performs. So they're basically just getting rid of the reload speed and still getting the same mag, so that's whatever. The Liberty is just getting some more of its stuff swapped around, and then the Regulus is going from 5% crit damage on the muzzle to 20% accuracy, so that should be pretty nice to make sure you hit those consistent shots. For gear sets, Foundry Bulwark received a pretty big nerf, which I'm sorry if you were a tank player and you're really excited for this, but I think this was deserved because I was watching people play through on like Heroic with it, and they could literally just stand stand in the middle of a room even after it got fixed and it wasn't getting affected by incoming repair, and they were just able to tank everything. So I think this was needed, and let's get into what the changes were. So the makeshift repair overtime effect is reduced from 40% of the damage over 10 seconds to 20% over 15 seconds. The improved materials, which is one of the amplification talents on either the chest or the backpack, I'm not sure which it is, increases that repair from 20 to 30%, and then the process refinery, which is the other one for the other chest or backpack, whichever, now increases that speed from 15 to 10 seconds. So now when it's fully buffed up, you will get 30% repair to your shield and your player over 10 seconds when you get hit by a bullet or any source of damage. So I think that's still going to be pretty nice in PvE, and it should just make it a lot more balanced in PvP. There's even further changes to it that are PvP specific that we'll get to soon, but I think this was deserved, but I hope and think that it won't make it obsolete. It should still be usable, but just bring it a bit more inline and not to the point where you can just solo a heroic and stand in the middle of a room. This should make it a lot better. And they do have a developer comment on this one. The intention for Foundry Bulwark is for it to be the premier gear set choice for tanks and players who are looking to maximize their survivability, especially when paired with a shield such as the Bulwark. These values should better represent the level of sustainability we intended this gear set to provide, as we still want situational awareness and smart positioning to be a factor in moment-to-moment decision making. The previous tuning during phase 1 and 2 meant even bad play couldn't be punished due to the overly generous damage reduction and self-repair strength. So that's basically what I was just saying, that they didn't want it to be where you could just stand and tank all that damage. Now it should actually matter what choices you make in the game in moment to moment, and that's good. For Brain's Heads, they're buffing the incoming repair bonus on R&K from 15 to 20%, so that's now in line with those repair skills changes they made in phase 2 to Alps and stuff like that, so that's good. They had some updates to some of the weapon balances that happened way back in phase 1. The Carbine 7 is going from 7.6% to 8.7% damage increase, the CTAR from 6.2 to 8.6, and the MPX is being brought down by 3% from 20.8 to 17.7, which it's still going to be super strong. I don't think 3% is going to be that noticeable. It's still like probably the best SMG choice, non-exotic of course. But yeah, the apartment and other MPXs are going to be very nice for this coming update. Now we move on to the skill changes. The cluster seeker mine targeting accuracy has been improved. I'm not going to read that whole comment, but basically it just means that currently when it tries to target someone, it'll just find their location and then pinpoint it and go there and explode. It won't follow them around if they move. Now it'll follow them around for a bit longer, and once they get closer, then they will do that bull charge as they call it and explode there. So it should help with pinpointing where some ads are or players and help you still get the damage on that. For the Hive, the Stinger Hive base damage has been reduced by 20%, and remember last PTS phase it went up by 75%, so this is not a huge nerf. It's still going to be really a lot more stronger than it is on live as far as the base damage goes, and so that's nothing to worry about there. And then the damage bonus per skill tier is being increased from 10 to 20%. The developer comment is that in order to make investing in skill tiers have a greater impact on the Stinger Hive's damage, we slightly reduced the base drone damage while doubling the amount of damage gained with each skill tier. These changes will result in a net buff for dedicated skill builds with 10% increased Stinger Hive drone damage at skill tier 6 compared to the TU9 live values. And this is really good. I've been saying for a long time that I think skill builds really need to have the focus on skill tiers and not on what you have on your gear or what, you know, the mods are or whatever. Skill tiers should be the primary way that you buff up your skills, and so I think this is a good indication of that and a good change overall. The Restorer Hive now gets a 5% drone flight speed buff per skill tier. This is really nice. Let me read the comments so that you understand why this is coming. Increases to the Restorer Hive's radius had the unfortunate effect of increasing the time it took for repair drones to reach their target the further away they were from the Hive. Increasing drone flight speed with each skill tier should help it offset the somewhat counterintuitive behavior when taking advantage of the increased area of effect and making the Restorer Hive a more reliable tool for healers. This is really nice. I like to play healer sets myself, and so having this change should just make those a bit more viable in like PvP, especially when you try to get that big area of effect and then it takes long for the charges to go. This should help with that with 25% at skill tier 6, and so that'll be a really nice benefit to have. Now moving down to some of these ones down here, this is what they were talking about when they said they reverted those stats effect changes, but they made some tunings to the skills themselves. These 4 skills are kind of the main ones that are used on like Legendary and the Raid, and so here's the changes that are coming to those. For the Chem Launcher, the Riot Foam and Snare duration bonus per skill tier is going from 20 to 10%. For the Blinder Firefly, the blind duration bonus per skill tier is being reduced from 20 to 10%, and the base blind duration going from 6 to 5 seconds. For the Pulse, the Banshee Pulse Confused duration is going from 5 to 4 seconds, and the Jammer Pulse base duration is going from 4 to 3 seconds. And finally, the Shock Trap base shock duration reduced from 5 to 3 seconds. In PvP, that is unchanged, and the Shock Trap base duration is going from 2 to 2.5 meters. And so I'm not going to read the developer comment because it's 5 paragraphs, but basically what they're saying is that they still want there to be some challenge in the layer difficulties, because right now you can basically just run one CC build and they blind everyone for like 20 seconds, and then everyone can just shoot them, and it kind of trivializes the whole experience. They don't necessarily want to make it, way harder, but they do want it to be a little less cheesy in that regard, and so they're changing these skills and should hopefully make that a bit more challenging, but not, just make those skills obsolete and those different types of builds. This should be a nice in-between, but we'll just have to wait and see. And here's some of the feedback from the people who are playing PTS Phase 3 as we speak. And then everyone can just shoot them, and it kind of trivializes the whole experience. They don't necessarily want to make it, way harder, but they do want it to be a little less cheesy in that regard, and so they're changing these skills and should hopefully make that a bit more challenging, but not, just make those skills obsolete and those different types of builds. This should be a nice in-between, but we'll just have to wait and see. And here's some of the feedback from the people who are playing PTS Phase 3 as we speak. And lastly, we come to the PvP changes, and I'm really excited for these because there were still a few outliers from both Phase 1 and 2 and currently in the game now that I think were really hindering the balance of PvP, but this, Phase 3 and these patch notes really kind of address most of those things. I'm not, after reading this and everything else that's coming, I'm not really too concerned about anything being meta. I'm sure something will arise and there will be, somewhat of a meta for the patch, because there always is, but I think that this, puts us at a pretty good start. Let's get into what the changes are. Foundry Bulwark, on top of its nerf for PvE in the entirety of the game, make sure for pairs repair for time effect reduced by 50% in PvP. That means at base it's going to give you 10% of your armor and your shield health back over 15 seconds, and then if you wear both the backpack and the chest piece, that'll go up to 15% repairs over 10 seconds. So I think, as much as people are probably going to be mad about this one, I'm really glad it's coming because I just think it had the potential to be such a cheesy gear set in PvP, and I think this will make it still a very viable tank set, especially when paired with a healer, but this should just bring it in line and not make it out of control so that people can't kill them. This should be really good. For weapons, shotgun damage is being reduced by 12.5%. I am very, very, very glad this is coming. Right now in live, if you haven't been in the Dark Zone recently, versatile and shotgun builds are everywhere. That's, basically what's become the meta after, people learn that incoming repair is going to go away. This is the next big thing, and so them taking preemptive steps on this is really good. Last week in Phase 2, we saw that versatile was going down to 25% from 35% for shotguns, and so this additional nerf on top of the overall weapon damage reduction in PvP should kind of, neutralize that meta and should make it in line with everything else. I'm really excited for that change. Pistol damage is being reduced by 10%. Don't know why that was really necessary, but that's a thing. And then for the merciless, binary trigger, amplified weapon damage, and explosion damage reduced by 50% in PvP, so that should just help with that burst damage not being a one-shot. For skills, the fire starter chem launcher in PvP is being reduced by 20% of its base damage. I'm very glad about this. This is one of those outliers I was talking about that in the live game and in the PTS thus far had no changes coming to it. It's still super strong. Its base damage has no modifier, and it can almost one-shot you just by the base damage, and then the fire, of course, is super strong with status effects. So this will help bring that more in line. I'm very excited for that one. Stinger Hive PvP damage is being increased by 20%, but let's just hold off your thoughts on that. I'm going to read the comment which goes in that specifically, and so that'll make more sense once I read that. So just wait a sec on that. The Striker Drone PvP damage is increased by 30%, and the Assault Turret PvP damage is increased by 55%, so those could be pretty viable. I'm interested to see what kind of builds people will make with those. Alright, now for the dev comment. We want dedicated skill builds to have multiple powerful defensive tools for area denial/control. In an attempt to replace the loss in bleed damage on the Stinger Hive during the first wave of the PTS, we compensated with a buff to the Hive's base drone damage that made it too powerful in the hands of non-skill builds. In order to address that, we lowered both the base damage and the PvP modified damage of the Stinger Hive's drones, but doubled the amount of damage gained from skill tiers. The end result is a minus 55% reduction in the Stinger Hive damage compared to the PTS Phase 2 values at skill tier 0 and negative 10% at skill tier 6. Compared to TU9 live values, it remains a 20 to 65% increase in the Stinger Hive damage in PvP. So to break that down, basically they're just making the skill tier investment for the Stinger Hive more worthwhile, which is good. That's the whole problem with them right now and why they're meta is that you can run it at tier 0, stack status effects, and you're just going to kill people and not even have to worry about investing into skill tiers, which is the entire point of the skill tier system. You want the skills to be powerful if you invest into them, and that's not what's happening right now. So now that minus 75% bleed that was brought back in Phase 1, 2 weeks ago is still a thing, and that base damage is being more impacted by skill tier, so it should just make the tier 0 and tier 1 and all of those a lot more balanced and a lot easier to deal with, and it shouldn't kill you nearly as fast, which is very, very good. Like I said, from the Stinger Hive stuff to the Fire Chem Launcher and those shotgun things, there's not a lot of outliers left in PvP that I'm too worried about, so I'm very pleased with these changes, and I think Phase 3 really finished the job with making sure that PvP is going to be in a good state when when TU10 finally launches. There we have it, guys. Those are the highlights from this week's PTS update Phase 3. From the further exotic elaborations to the very welcome PvP balances, I can't deny saying that I'm thoroughly hyped for this update at this point. PvE is going to be more fair and fun, PvP will finally be balanced, exotics are going to be powerful and fun, there's really just not much bad to pick out of it. TU10 is truly shaping up to be great. Like I said at the start, I think this will be the final week of PTS, so expect TU10 in the last week or two of June would be my prediction. I bet the devs want to keep their initial promise of a June release, but obviously need to compensate for the unplanned third week of PTS, the verification processes, etc. Regardless, we're in the home stretch for this update coming to live, and I couldn't be happier. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so that you can be updated every time I upload. Let me know your thoughts on the Phase 3 changes below, but also, if you're still watching and plan on coming to Saturday's Last Stand event, tell me so in the comments below. I'm really excited for it and hope to see as many of you as possible there. Have a great day, y'all. Stay safe, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.